In our last week of Excel, I'd like to focus on 3 advanced features. While these aren't the only 3 advanced features that Excel has, they are the 3 that I think may come in handy in the healthcare field. The first of these features is the function VLOOKUP. VLOOKUP searches for the value you specify and brings back a matching value from another column. The V in VLOOKUP stands for vertical. There's also HLOOKUP for when you want a value from another row. This is the syntax statement for VLOOKUP, which tells you what values you have to put into the function. But let me translate this a little. There are 4 different values you have to put into the function VLOOKUP. After the usual equals VLOOKUP parenthesis, you first put the value you want to look up. Then you put the range of values where you want to look for the value and where the answer you want returned would be. Next, you put the column number in the range of cells that contains the value you want returned. And lastly, if you're looking for the exact value you said you're looking for, then you put false. If an approximate match is okay, then you put true. Here's an example of VLOOKUP. In this spreadsheet, we have a list of employees, what department they're in, and what their salary is. And we want to be able to put their name into cell F2 and have Excel tell us their salary in cell F3. Now the formula that we would use in F3 is VLOOKUP, the value we want to find. In this case, let's say it's Apple Lynn. Then the cells A2 through C15. We know the names are in column A and start at A2, and that the salaries we want are in column C and end at C15, so that's the range that we give Excel to look in. Then we say column 3 is where we'll find the salary we want returned to us. Remember, this is the 3rd column of the range that you provided to Excel. And lastly, we want false because we want an exact match to the name that we provide. Now let's try VLOOKUP. Open the VLOOKUP worksheet and let's figure out the formula that we need. I'll work through the first one with you. The first formula we need is to find the 3rd ranked county in length of life. So we know we have to use VLOOKUP to give us the name of the county when Excel finds the 3rd ranking. So the value we want Excel to look for is 3 for the 3rd ranking. The range is going to be where we want to look for the values. So A2 is where the values start, and C58 is where they end. Next is the column that has the return value. The return value for us is the name of the county. That's what we want Excel to tell us. And that happens to be in the 2nd column of the range that we just stated. And lastly, we want an exact match, so we're going to say false. This gives us the entire formula that we need. Now, try putting together the other 3 formulas yourself. Double check the values that you got for each of your VLOOKUP formulas using the image that's provided on this slide. The next feature I'd like to discuss is goal seeking. This is a really neat feature because it allows you to see how one data element in a formula impacts another. It lets us play around with cause and effect scenarios or what if questions. Using goal seek, we can change the value of a cell to see how it changes the results that we're interested in. We can access GoalSeek by going to the Data tab and clicking on the What If Analysis button. Then select GoalSeek and you'll see a window that asks for 3 different values. The To value text box is for the result you're interested in seeing. Then you tell Excel which cell it can change. and then click OK and OK again to accept the value it found. Let's give it a try to better understand it. Go to the Goal Seek worksheet. Let's say these are your grades for the semester and the way the class is assessed. You've finished all of your assignments and only have the final exam left, and you want to know if there's a possibility that you can still get an A in the course. So what grade do you need on your final exam? Our end goal in this case is going to be to get at least an 89.5% as a final grade. And we want to do this by changing the cell that's currently in yellow, cell B12. In the Goal Seek worksheet, click on the yellow cell, which is what we want to change. Then go to the What If Analysis button in the Data tab. Click on Goal Seek from the drop-down menu and enter the Set cell, which has to be a formula. This is the cell with the total grade percentage on it. Then enter the To value. What do we want the answer to come up as? And we want it to be at least 89.5%. And then we tell Excel which cell it can change. And we want that one to be the yellow cell. Then click OK twice. And you'll notice that Excel filled in the yellow cell with the value that gives you the total grade that we want. Looking at the value given by GoalSeek, you can see that you would need an 89 points out of 80 points on the final exam, which isn't possible. This means that you wouldn't be able to get an A as a final grade in this course. The last feature we will be discussing are pivot tables. We use pivot tables to summarize data, and it allows us to manipulate data in different ways without messing around with our original data set. We could use it for healthcare claims data to look at by patient. We may want to get a sum of the data by county patients live in, or maybe we want the data to be sorted by the state patients live in and the number of readmissions they had in our hospital. There are endless possibilities of how we can look at data, and pivot tables help us sort through them fairly quickly. So we start by selecting the cells with the headers that we want to include in our pivot table. Then go to the Insert tab and select Pivot Tables. You'll notice that you might get a window that allows you to change some settings, but for our purposes, we'll keep all the default settings that create a new worksheet every time we create a new pivot table. You'll notice a field list shows up. At the top of that window, you'll see all the fields with check marks, which are pulled from the column headers you used in your original dataset. You can either check the boxes for each of the fields that you want to add to your pivot table, or you can drag and drop the fields to the areas you want them, which are listed below in 4 different groups. We first have filters on the top left-hand side, which work exactly the same way filters did previously when we talked about it 2 weeks ago. Then we have columns and rows where we can tell Excel what information we want in the rows and what information we want in the columns of our new pivot table. And lastly, we can tell Excel what elements we want added together. Let's try this out with a basic pivot table in the pivot table worksheet. This data has the number of uncomplicated C-sections, uncomplicated primary C-sections, and gallbladder surgeries from January to September 2015. Let's create a pivot table that shows us the sum of each of the different types of surgeries in the data. So select the data that we want with the headers and go to the Insert tab and click on Pivot Table. The first thing I usually do is uncheck everything to start off clean because Excel rarely gives me what I'm looking for automatically. Now let's think this through. We want the sums, so we'll put the 3 elements that we want sums for under the area that indicates sum values. You'll notice that Excel automatically updated the table and gives us the sum without us having to do anything else. Be sure to hit save to save this worksheet. It will likely save as sheet 1. Now try one on your own. Select the data again and insert a new pivot table. I want the total number of each surgery by county. Here's an example of what your final table should look like. That's it for the advanced features I want us to know about right now, but there's so much more that Excel can do. We've gone through the basics of what you should know as graduates of our program. I strongly urge you to practice these skills because we could have an entire course dedicated to just learning Excel and still not get through everything Excel has to offer. So set yourself apart by picking up these skills in Excel.